Okay, everyone, we want to wish you a wonderful and heartfelt Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to the river, to all of you joining the live stream, but also to all of you watching after the fact on internet land. We want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. And we pray that wherever you are, scattered to the four corners of the earth, that the Father is moving in your lives. If you want to come join us live, if you're watching online on, whether it be YouTube or Rumble, and you want to join the live stream, or you just want to connect with the community, we do gather every Shabbat at 9 a.m. PST. That is the time that we all meet. And if you're wondering how to join the live stream, just simply go to riverbranchfellowship.com, scroll down on the main homepage, and there'll be a button or a link asking you to subscribe to the weekly newsletter. Click on that, and this little box will pop up, and just type in your first and last name and email. And every Friday, you'll be sent the newsletter, which will contain the Zoom logging info to join us on the live stream. So we would be more than happy to have you come join us, come say hi, and to come and fellowship virtually with us. Okay, A Servant's Heart, Part 3. This series, again, it's a practical, or it's aimed to be a more practical series aimed at really help us understand what's written in the Word, but within a modern context. We all understand that there is nothing new under the sun, that what has been shall be again. But we don't live in ancient times. And so sometimes, we read the scriptures and the wording can throw us off, some of the idioms, the way that they spoke. And so this series is really aimed at taking these ancient principles that have been prevalent throughout this time domain and really help us make them applicable to us today in a way that's practical and in a way that we can understand. Because, one of the things that I've witnessed time and time again is that people know the Word and they know what's written, but they struggle sometimes to make the bridge between what's written and to see how these things actually practically play out in our lives and in our modern expressions of what it means to be in the faith. And so today we're going to look at serving the system. And by that, I mean the religious system within a negative context, if that makes sense. Again, this is nothing new. It was happening in the days of Noah. It was happening in the days of the prophets. It was happening in the days of Yeshua. And wonder not that it is well and truly happening today. Just that we've probably attached different terminology to it as we draw closer to the end of the age. Before we jump into the meat of today's teaching, I want to quickly recap what we covered last week. And it will be a quick recap because it was quite a detailed teaching, if you want to call it that, and to kind of revisit everything in the recap would almost be futile. So we looked at serving man last week and how these things kind of manifest in our modern lives. One of the biblical examples we used was King Saul. And we saw, in the incident of King Saul going to fight against Amalek and not exactly heeding the word of the prophet Samuel and the word of Yah. He cherry picked which bits he wanted to do and did his own thing for the rest of it. Now, in the process, when prophet Samuel held King Saul to account, we saw that King Saul was actually given the opportunity to show repentance twice. But the first time, he justified his own position. He justified why he did what he did. And the second time that he was held to account, not only did he continue in justifying self, but he also blamed the people for his own actions. Not only that, all of that was dressed up in the service of Elohim. And so we saw that King Saul, he served the people, but actually the driver behind him serving the people was that he was afraid of man. It said, King Saul says, I feared the people. And so we see that King Saul is serving the people, but fear is the principal driver. And Saul was dressing this up in the service of Elohim. Now, I made the point that by serving the people from a place of fear, he was actually serving self. He was trying to protect self. He clearly had an issue of the heart that resulted in him fearing man. And rather than address the issue, he just dressed it up, justified his own actions, and basically placated to his own fear. This means that Saul, by fearing man, did not have the fear of Elohim, and so wonder not why his actions would display a lack of wisdom, because the fear of Elohim is the beginning of wisdom. But because he didn't fear Elohim and feared man instead, we see very unwise actions regarding this whole scenario. The other biblical example that we used was the well-known story of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And we saw how these three actually drew disciples unto themselves, and they specifically used the tribe of Reuben to do so. My personal opinion is that because Reuben was, they were carrying shame from their forefather for usurping his father's bed. Someone had also pointed out that the tribe of Reuben, the way the camp was laid out, would have been right next to Korah. And so there's also the proximity thing. But again, why use the tribe of Reuben to bolster their ranks? We saw that Korah and co, they set up their own form of service to the body. And that this was actually under the guise of serving the assembly. We saw that they were saying, well, the assembly is set apart and Yah is in their midst. And while that was kind of technically true, they were using that as a cover for actually their own desires. Their true desire was that it was all about self. But Korah was doing it under the guise of serving the assembly, hence why I chose to put it under serving man. The outcome of their actions was usurping and accusing of the servant leadership that Yah had put in place. Another key thing that we saw was actually the avoidance of accountability, especially from Dathan and Abiram. So when Moshe said, right, tomorrow, let's see who Yah will choose, okay? We saw that Dathan and Abiram were like, no, we're not coming up. We're not coming up. Only Korah had the spine to actually come up. I don't want to say spine in the positive sense, but you can really see that he wholeheartedly believed what he was doing. But Dathan and Abiram actually avoided the accountability. And what's interesting, that this would have been the chance to actually prove their so-called worthiness to be the sanctified priesthood, if I may call it that. And so it's almost like deep down inside in their subconscious mind that maybe their spirit knew something was not right. I don't know. But what we are given is that Dathan and Aviram avoided the accountability, even when it meant that they could have the opportunity to prove their so-called worthiness. Now, Moshe very astutely knew what the real reason that was driving all of this behavior. And it was that Korah, Dathan, and Aviram wanted the priesthood for themselves. It wasn't good enough that Korah was a Levite, arguably charged with carrying the most prestigious objects within the tabernacle. No. That wasn't enough. He wanted the priesthood. And so we see that this is actually feeding self-worth. You know, my wife and I were discussing this particular part of the teaching and the Korah thing, and I remembered that what's really interesting is that the accountability and the charge of the priesthood laid upon the priests, not upon the Levites. The Torah is very clear that the priests, the sons of Aaron, shall carry the burden and the responsibility of the tabernacle. And this is something that I've witnessed, you know, especially when people start, you know, coming against servant leadership that Yah has put in place and setting up their own forms of service to the body. They want the goodie bag, but without the attached accountability. You know, Korah wanted the priesthood, forgetting that it was the priests that were responsible for it. So if anything happened that was against the Torah commandments regarding the priesthood, it was actually the priests that would die. It doesn't say anything really about the Levites carrying that burden. And so Korah wanted the priesthood, not realizing the price that comes with it. And this is something that I've seen, especially when people want to set themselves up as so-called teachers and servant leaders. They're happy to put their teachings out and stuff, but the minute that, you know, you start to say, well, do you want to be a teacher? They go, oh, no, I'm not a teacher. You know, I've had to say to people, well, if you want to teach, you've got to, you know, start counseling the people and giving them good advice. And, oh, no. There's always a price and responsibility that comes with these things. And so, again, this goes back to this thing of the avoidance of accountability. I want the so-called outwardly prestige and being looked at upon by the people, but I don't want the responsibility that comes with it. And so you see this thing of shirking responsibility, not dealing with accountability. And so the consequence of that usually ends up in bad fruit. However, after the whole Korah debacle was put to an end, we realized that actually it didn't stop there. The whole Korah incident actually went on to infect the little ones. And so last week I called it Operation Mop Up, that Aaron and Moshe still had work to do, even though the problem was dealt with. And this is why we have strict and very pointed instruction, especially in the Brit, regarding fellowship dynamics and those that would cause division amongst the body. It's like an infection. It's like a cancer. It spreads when allowed to just spread. And then we looked at some of the practicals. We spent quite a good bit on here on the practical aspects of what does it look like when we're serving the body, but we're doing it from a place of serving man rather than serving Elohim. We looked at, serving Elohim, the body, from a place of a negative fear of Elohim, this self-condemning place, and all the fruit that would generate, putting yourself on a performance treadmill, people pleasing, the list goes on and on. What does it look like? What are the fruits of serving the body when you're trying to feed your self-worth, whether it be from an arrogant place or a self-condemning place? What does it look like when serving the body from a place of hurt, whether being hurt leads you to a place of being, hardline Torah terrorist, whack everything, or whether actually being too soft. And I also made the point that some people can be one extreme or the other, but quite often people can be one extreme in one area of their life and another extreme in another. And so, it's very nuanced. And so this is why it takes wisdom, experience, and discernment to really be able to kind of like scratch under the surface and see what the real drivers are behind behavior. Because as we're going to see today, in the modern religious world and the ancient, in this system-based, mystery Babylon service, that there's a big focus on the outside. There's a focus on behavior, the outside of the tomb, the whitewashing, at the expense of the drivers and the heart and the motives that would actually drive these behaviors. And so this is why we see this perpetual cycle of hurt. Hurt people go on to hurt people. And we looked at some of the fruits that can occur within the marriage covenant when we serve man and not Elohim. A key example, allowing the pastor or the rabbi to usurp your marriage and all the bad fruit that goes on to generate. And this is also quite often coupled with serving the system. What's the fruit of putting your children above your spouse? Welcome to the modern day. Look around. How does it look? And even maybe putting your spouse above Elohim, which is quite often leads to a married couple and family going into spiritual delusion. I've seen this. This is usually one of the things that occurs when people end up denying Messiah, unfortunately. And so today we're looking at this little point here. Serving the system. Now, as I've said, serving man, serving the system, serving self, these rarely come by themselves. There's a lot of overlap in these. In fact, you will always find serving self at the root or behind serving the system and serving man, as we shall see today. Because when you're serving man, you're really serving self. And as we're going to see today, the system will placate to you serving yourself. Again, we experience this from various perspectives, whether it be married, single, from a place of servant leadership, whether it be, being a congregant, if you can call it that. All of us experience these things. What is the desire of our heart? Where is our heart's desire? Because it will determine whether we end up serving man, the system, and self, or whether we're truly serving Messiah. So, today, we're going to look at a passage that is probably known by most of you, but hopefully we're going to maybe get some deeper insight into this famous passage. Hopefully you'll be able to get a newfound depth and nuanced understanding of this passage. What passage am I on about? Mark chapter 7. Most of you watching this will be very well aware of this because of, this topic of the traditions of men. But quite often the deeper, weightier matter is altogether missed regarding this passage. As we go through this and the relevant passages associated with it, we're going to pull out the practical things of, I really want people to think, how does this manifest in our lives today? Most of you who are listening today will actually have experienced almost all of the things, or at least witnessed these things. Verse 1. Now, when the Pharisees gathered to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. And so this is one of the Talmudic Jewish traditions, that you had to do this ritual hand washing before you were to eat. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the tradition of the elders. And so again, I don't want to dwell on this part too much, because most of you will understand that the issue here is not coming against the commands of Elohim, quite the opposite. The issue here is holding to the traditions of men over the commands of Elohim, okay? So the context is very clear. We're dealing with man-made traditions. In this particular case, it's Jewish tradition, but mark my words, the traditions are just as many and just as rife on the Christian riverbank, okay? So this is not pick on Judah day. We're looking at this from the religious system, whichever side of the riverbank it seems to fall on. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. Now, again, this is not referring to the commandments of Elohim. Remember that even in the Torah, there's certain principles of washing, cups, pots, to do with clean and unclean. But Judah, as they seem to be very apt to do, they used to love to add fence posts around the commands. So they would go above and beyond, essentially. The Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" And so we see one of the first outcomes here of serving the system and its traditions, okay? Look at how the Pharisees are coming to Yeshua in a sanctimonious, self-righteous manner and saying, well, look at your disciples. They're not towing the line. And there's the inference that they are unclean. Okay, this is what the Pharisees and scribes are saying. Your disciples, according to our standard of righteousness, are not set apart because they do not do what we do. We're the holy ones. We're the chosen ones. We're the ones in charge. Do you see what's going on? And so one of the outcomes of serving the system will be whitewashing, right? We know that we'll go on to see that Yeshua is like, guys, you've missed the point. It's what comes out the heart that actually matters. That's what defiles, not what you do on the outside. And so it's this focus on the outwardly appearance and the focus on seeming holy and righteous to others outside at the expense of true heart circumcision. But not only is there whitewashing and self-righteousness, there's actually the condemnation of others not following suit. So it's not good enough that you're putting yourself above other people, but you're now going to condemn those that do not follow as you do, okay? So this is one of the first outcomes that will come out of serving the system. We're being given the quote-unquote Jewish example here. But again, Christianity has its own version. Oh, your dress is not down to the ankles. You're a harlot. Or, fill in the blank. Oh, you didn't partake of our little Bible study. Well, you must not be really serving Elohim. On and on and on. Oh, in some of the older, more rigid Christian circles, there's a big thing on men having to be clean shaven. And it's like, oh, you don't look right. Oh, your hair's a little bit past the jawline. Off to the lake of fire. Christianity is just as guilty of this. And I'm going to make a point. The Torah movement is just as guilty of this as well, because most of them have now got traditions from both riverbanks. They're twice the sons of Gehenna, as Yeshua would say. He said to them, well, did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites? So you're seeing now another outcome of serving the system, hypocrisy before Elohim. As it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. It's funny how the Roman world can see this from a mile away. And it's actually those caught up in religion and serving the system that are just completely blinded to it. We'll see as to where that blinding comes from. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. And so now you're seeing another outcome. Serving the system will always, always, always masquerade as serving Elohim. Always. This is why you have 40,000 plus denominations on the Christian side. And okay, Judah doesn't have as many denominations, but it has its denominations, all of them claiming the true faith and being the chosen ones. So, and they believe it. It's not like they're doing this maliciously. They genuinely believe that they are serving Elohim. And so now another outcome is delusion. So we're seeing self-righteousness, whitewashing, focusing on the outside at the expense of heart circumcision, condemnation of those that do not follow suit, thinking you're serving Elohim, and the whole time you're spiritually blind to it. Delusion. There's a lot there, right? You leave the commandment of Elohim and hold to the tradition of men. So who are they serving now, right? They're not, they think they're serving Elohim, but actually they're serving the system. And as we're going to see, serving the system, pull that layer back and you'll see it's actually serving self. He said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of Elohim in order to establish your tradition. So again, this is not a matter of the Torah's done away with. This is an issue of actually putting the traditions of men above the biblical foundation of the faith. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. So this is the commandment, the Torah itself. But you say, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you would have gained from me is korban, that is given to Elohim, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother. And so you have to have an understanding of Torah to know what this is really saying. But korban is literally, it's a word used for the sacrifices given to Elohim through the Levitical priesthood. It comes from the root word karav, which means to draw near. And drawing near, I've done teachings on this in the past, but it's priestly language. It's temple service language. And so what the Pharisees and the scribes were saying was, rather than using your goods and services to look after your father or mother in their old age, as the Torah prescribes, if you give it to the temple service, you will have blessing, essentially. And so it's actually an ancient form of Catholicism, if that makes sense. You know how the Catholics say, well, you know, never mind all this bad stuff you've done. Just say your Hail Marys and give me, you know, $2,000 and I'll forgive your sins. It's that kind of principle that was going on. Now, it's probably and very likely that actually the scribes and Pharisees benefited financially and physically from this. So again, they're serving self. But look at how they're doing it. They're using the concept and they're using the Levitical sacrifices to get their own means. And so, again, you have to remember, korban, this word, is literally a word used for giving a sacrifice through the Levitical priesthood. And so what they were saying is, don't you mind looking after your mother and father in their old age, give it as a sacrifice to the temple and you will be blessed and we will, you know, you will be looked after. This is what was actually going on. And so they're using this appearance of serving the Father, actually. It's dressed up in religious service, but it's actually serving the system. And the outcome of this is that innocent people get hurt now. Because now you have a mother and father that are no longer being looked after in their old age. And this is wicked. And it's being done in the name of serving Elohim. And so you have a poor sap that's being deluded into committing sin, actually. And so there's many drivers going on just here. You got the drivers from the scribes and the Pharisees, probably getting some self-gain out of this. There's the driver from the person being told this. Well, I want to be blessed by the Father rather than look after my parents. It's all feeding self. Oh, and I get to do it in the name of Elohim. Tick. It's wicked. It's wicked. Thus making void the word of Elohim by your tradition that you have handed down, and many such things you do. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And so another outcome is not only you hurting the innocent in the process, but you're now trampling on the word in the name of Elohim. And thus now the name of Elohim is dragged through the mud for all to see. And as I said earlier, it's amazing how the Roman non-believing world can see through this hypocrisy clearly. They're not the ones that have had their spiritual eyes darkened. It's actually those that are serving the system. Interesting. Now, Yeshua quotes Isaiah. And Hebraically, when you quote a passage, you're not just quoting the statements you're saying, you're actually bringing to attention the whole passage, and not only the whole passage, but the understanding thereof, okay? It's a very Hebraic thing. You kind of make an allusion to a passage by quoting a couple of things, but the idea is that you know what the whole passage is saying and what it's actually meaning. So what is Yeshua truly referring to? He's quoting this passage, Isaiah 29 from verse 9. This is Yah speaking to Judah at the time through the prophet Isaiah. Astonish yourselves and be astonished. Blind yourselves and be blind. Be drunk, but not with wine. Stagger, but not with strong drink. So we're seeing this spiritual blindness being spoken of here. For Yah has poured out, not the adversary, Yah has poured out upon you a spirit of deep sleep and has closed your eyes, the prophets, and covered your heads, the seers. You have to understand that the prophets and the seers in ancient times were seen as the servants of Elohim. And so the passage is actually saying that those in positions of service and those in authority will actually be deluded. They will be blinded. They will not be able to see clearly. And it's being likened unto drunkenness. The vision of all of this has become to you like the words of a book that is sealed. When men give it to one who can read, saying, read this, he says, I cannot, for it is sealed. And when they give the book to one who cannot read, saying, read this, he says, I cannot read. This is what Yeshua was quoting to the scribes and the Pharisees. Remember, the scribes and the Pharisees had access to the actual Torah scrolls and the scrolls of the prophets. What Yeshua was saying is, you are the ones that Isaiah is speaking of. You handle the scrolls and you read them, but you actually cannot see them. He's literally saying to the scribes and Pharisees, you guys are deluded. You have been blinded. Why? Because you're a bunch of hypocrites. He's being very, very sharp and cutting with how he's quoting the prophet Isaiah. Now we get into the reason why. Yah said, because this people draw near with their mouth and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. So this is what Yeshua is quoting. This verse here, verse 13. Notice he didn't mention the bit before it, but he absolutely meant it. The Pharisees and scribes would have known exactly what he's saying. Why do you think they hated him so much? Because he called them out on it. And not only did he call them out on their hypocrisy, he said, you guys are blind, even though you read the scrolls. Therefore, behold, I will again do wonderful things with this people, with wonder upon wonder. The wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the discernment of their discerning men shall be hidden. Again, this is what Yeshua was saying to the Pharisees, and here we are today. You know, this means like spiritual delusion is this applies to anyone, okay, that will draw near to Yah with their lips, but keep their hearts far from him. Or as Paul would say, having an outwardly form of godliness, but denying the power therein, okay? Same kind of principle. But this is particularly aimed and particularly true of those that claim to serve and those that claim to know better. And so this is why it's judgment begins at the house of Elohim, as Ezekiel says, and everyone misses this. Begin with the elders at the gates. Begin with those in authority. There's a higher accountability that for those that would claim to serve and know more. You who hide deep from Yah, your counsel, whose deeds are in the dark, and who say, who sees us and who knows us? So now that you see this thing of they're not holding themselves accountable to biblical Yah-given accountability. They're doing what they desire, they're serving self, and they're doing so behind the scenes, even if that means within their little kibbutz and cabal, so to speak. You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay, that the thing made should say of its maker, he did not make me? Or thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding. You're actually getting to the real what's going on here. Because when someone is in this place of spiritual blindness, they're claiming the faith, but they're choosing to serve the system instead. What they're literally saying is that I am greater than Yah. That's what they're really saying. That's what their actions are saying. And I believe that this is no different than the passage in Isaiah 14, oh, son of the morning star, who I will ascend above the stars of Elohim. It's a position of usurping. It's a position of self-delusion, megalomania, grandeur, thinking you know better. And so you can see this on the Judah front, but you can actually see this more clearly on the Christian front. There may as well be again, it doesn't matter if you're serving the system and serving the traditions of men above that of the Creator, you're essentially saying that we're greater than the Creator. It's folly. And this is how you know it's spiritual delusion. When you challenge it, you're usually met with hatred and persecution and justification, much like the Pharisees, much like those in positions of service today that are serving the system rather than serving Elohim. So this is, most people understand the thing of traditions and that. Some will also know that Yeshua was referring to Isaiah chapter 7, but let's look at the deeper issue because this is often missed, what Yeshua was really saying. He called to the people to him again and said to them, hear me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing, this is our King speaking, okay? So hear this. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him. But the things that come out of a person are what defile him. The King has spoken, mic drop. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him. So how do we actually reconcile that statement with some of the statements we see in the Torah? We'll get to that. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. Yeshua is literally saying, some of you are going to hear what I'm saying, some of you are not. And if you're not, you're either not ready or you're in a spirit of delusion. Pick one. When they had entered the house and left the people, his disciples asked him about the parable. And he said to them, "Then are you also without understanding?" He's saying this to his disciples. In the English, you get without understanding. In the Greek, it's one word, asunetos. It means unintelligent, without understanding, stupid, senseless, foolish, and by implication, lack of moral quality. He's literally saying to his disciples, let me modernize it. Really, guys? I mean, really? You've been with me this long and you're asking me this? Really? That's what he said. You're actually seeing Yeshua's frustration here. He's saying, guys, come on. You should know better. He's literally saying, are you being willingly ignorant? Are you being stupid right now? And I bring this up because, unfortunately, I've witnessed this. As the Apostle Paul would say in the book of Hebrews, some of you ought to be teachers by now, but I'm having to relay the foundation of the milk. Yeshua experienced it. Paul experienced it. Unfortunately, I've seen it. And sometimes you think, really? But what's going on? The whole context of this is serving the system. Look, you've got to remember that, yes, the disciples would have had a much better understanding of the faith than any of us. But what was it that raised them in the faith? It was an infected Pharisaical system. And so we forget that the disciples had to get rid of their own leaven. They had to get rid of their own mystery Babylon. And this is what the whole process of discipleship was about. In fact, we see Peter after the resurrection returning to his vomit, so to speak, and Paul had to hold him to account because Peter started separating himself from the foreigners and sticking only to the Jewish people, right? He hadn't let go of that last little bit of leaven from the Pharisees. So when Yeshua is showing his frustration with the Pharisees, with his disciples, saying, are you guys being stupid? You have to understand where that was coming from. Why were the disciples a little bit hard of hearing? Because despite them having a better understanding of the faith than us, they still had to contend with Mystery Babylon in them. They had served the system up to a point. That's why they were hard of hearing. And now here's the thing, is Yeshua frustrated at the disciples or is he really frustrated at the system? It's an interesting question to ask. Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him? He's repeating himself. Again, hear this. Whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart, but his stomach and is expelled, right? In one end, out the other. Even the shadow picture of the physical body is showing you that. The body is literally processing and getting rid of what's not good. And he said what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. Now, note this. All of these things come to serve self. Evil thoughts. Don't tell me the devil put evil thoughts in your mind. Yeshua is literally saying it's coming out of your heart. Sexual immorality, self. Theft, self. Murder, self. Adultery, self. Coveting, self. Wickedness, self. Deceit, self. All of it is self. But all of what Yeshua is saying is in the context of serving the system. When you serve the system, it will foster an environment for all this stuff to come out of you. So though you may be serving the system, it's actually placating to you serving self. And that's why I say there's a lot of between serving man, the system, and self. It's one big hodgepodge and mishmash. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. They defile a person, not what goes in. Okay, where am I going with this? I'm going to make some statements that may cause knee-jerk reactions, okay? So did Yeshua. Just bear with me, okay? Bear with me. Your flesh, your body, is already defiled. Can we agree with that? Because you are fallen. We are all fallen. Our physical housing, our flesh suit, is already defiled. How can you defile that which is already defiled? You are already in an unclean state. You were born into an unclean state. Your physical flesh suit is fallen. Praise Yah that it is sentenced to die. So we do not have to live in this defiled, fallen state. Not only are we defiled, but the whole creation has been subjected to it, right? Because of the fall of man. So everything is defiled. Everything. Every physical shadow picture thing is defiled. This is why it says flesh and blood will not inherit the kingdom. This is why your flesh is destined to die. Okay? So let's lay that foundation down. This is where the knee jerks come up. Eating unclean foods is not what defiles you. By the king's word, nothing that goes in, okay, I sense the knee jerks. Bear with me, bear with me. It's not that goes in that defiles you, it's what comes out. Now, what is it that comes out? Wicked thoughts, evil desires, wickedness, thefts, coveting. Yah has said through his Torah, this food is clean, this food is not. I do not want you to eat that unclean food. But when you know that that food is unclean and you say, I will eat it anyway, is it the unclean food that's defiling you? Or is it that the fact that you're willing to usurp the word, usurp the throne, and that command is exposing in you that you actually don't care about what the Creator says? You are already defiled. If you know that food is unclean and you choose to eat it and you don't care, you're already defiled before the food goes in you. Remember, the unclean shrimp is destined to die too. The unclean pig is going to die too. It's subjected to futility, is what Paul says. Well, guess what? So are you. So are you. So again, this is not about undoing the commands of Torah. This is about what is the Torah actually supposed to do. So again, it's not eating the unclean food that defiles you. It's exposing whether your heart is defiled or not. Because if you're willing to eat that unclean food and you go, you know what, screw this, that is exposing what is truly defiled, and it's your heart. And what do you think Yah is more worried about? Your flesh suit that he has condemned to die, by the way, or is he more worried about your heart? So this is not about undoing the commands. It's about what are the commands truly for. The Torah commands are not there to sanctify that which is destined to die, i.e. your flesh. That's not what the Torah commands are about. The Torah commands are there to expose. Let's go back to part 1. What is your heart's desire? That's what the Torah commands actually expose in you. The Torah says, you shall not commit adultery. Okay? But if you say, screw that, I'm going to go do what I want and I'm going to sleep with the whole town, what is that exposing in you? It shows that you do not care for Yah's order. You do not care for authority. In fact, you don't even care about your spouse that you claim to love. All you care about is satisfying your own evil desires. That commandment will expose whether or not your heart is defiled. That's what the Torah is about. It exposes the heart of the matter. Pun intended. Look at any Torah commandment, and if you're willing to go against it, ask yourself, what is that exposing in me? And so this is what Yeshua was really saying with Mark chapter 7. It's not that which goes in that defiles you. It's that which comes out. And the Torah is going to expose what's coming out of your heart. That's what the covenant is truly about. Because remember, you are fallen. Your flesh is defiled. Yah has sentenced it to die. He doesn't want your flesh in his kingdom, nor should we. What does he want? A heart after his own heart. And the Torah commandments are going to expose that in us, whether it's there or whether it's not. It's going to expose what and who is truly your heart's desire. Does that make sense? And this is what Yeshua was really saying, because look at what the Pharisees were doing. They were eating clean. They were washing cups. They were doing all this stuff on the outside of the cup and, these outwardly things, but yet inside they were filled with dead men's bones. Were they not? Yeshua is saying, yeah, you look great on the outside, but inside you're wicked. In fact, he goes as far as saying, you are of your father, the devil, the adversary, despite your outwardly appearances. And so and this is something that Mystery Babylon, the system, will get you caught up in. Focus on the outside of the tomb at the expense of the inward heart circumcision. Just because the outside is clean does not mean the inside is. But if you work on the inside, do not be surprised that you start seeing things on the outside, because what is truly written on your heart will end up coming back out. Do you see the process? So Yeshua was not annulling the Torah by saying it's not what goes in, but what he's actually upholding the Torah and saying the Torah is going to expose what's in your heart. It's going to expose whether you're filled with theft, greedy desires, adultery, all these things. It will expose. And so, how does the system even appeal to us? Because we all know the system is quote unquote bad. It's evil. But how does it appeal to us? Because we're all fallen, right? You know you like it. By the way, that is meant to have sexual overtones. Proverbs 2:16, so you will be delivered from the forbidden woman. The context is if you heed wisdom, accountability, discernment, and the commandments, okay? It says that these things will deliver you from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her Elohim. And so here, notice the woman is forbidden. And if you're saying, I know the woman is forbidden, but I'm going for it anyway, what is that exposing in you? That you do not care for Yah's order. You are usurping his word. And if you're going to usurp his word, I guarantee you will usurp his throne. And he wants to know whether you're going to usurp his throne or not, because there's an age to come. And he needs to know that that bride that will be sitting with him will have a heart after his own heart. The words are smooth. We have warnings of heaping up teachers to tickle the ears, okay? By the way, I've seen people that their form of ear tickling is hearing a convicting message. Isn't that funny? You can give the most convicting message and they're like, preach it, brother, amen, hallelujah. And then they do nothing. Nothing changes. It's actually that they're having their ears tickled. They're thinking, because I've heard a convicting message, my heart is now circumcised, forgetting that the Shema is hear and do. They've heard, but they've not done the doing. So the words will appeal, right? It sounds good. It's sensual. Lust of the flesh, smooth. Proverbs 5, for the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. So now it's placating to the lust of the flesh. Ooh, honey, oil. By the way, oil was a luxury good back in ancient times. So you can make the argument that it's also placating to the pride of life. It's like having the honey. It's like having the luxury goods. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. By the way, if you read in the ESV, it will say, but in the end, it is bitter as wormwood. Look at the Hebrew. It actually says her end is bitter as wormwood, referring to the forbidden woman. I believe this is an allusion to Mystery Babylon in the book of Revelation, because she meets a pretty grisly end, shall we say? Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? Now, intoxicated in the English, it can be, the Hebrew can mean intoxicated. So you've got this idea of drunkenness again. So think, I've done the teachings, as has Curtis, but this forbidden woman spoken of in the Proverbs 5 is what Revelation would then declare as Mystery Babylon. This spirit of seduction, of religious harlotry, the system with which all the kings of the earth have committed harlotry with, right? And what does she have in her hand? A cup of wine, of the fornication, right? It's drunkenness and spiritual adultery language. And as we saw in Isaiah 29, when you honor him with your lips, but you serve the system instead of serving Yah, you're promised the spirit of deep sleep and spiritual drunkenness. The word shagar, though, for intoxicated, shagar in Hebrew can mean to err, to stray, to swerve. So think going to the left or to the right. Meander, going round and round the mountain. This is why you see people that just do not grow. If people are not growing, they're entertaining something they shouldn't be. To reel, to be intoxicated, to err in drunkenness, to go astray morally. Now look at this, to commit sin of ignorance or inadvertence. So it doesn't even have to be conscious. This is why there's many that are caught up in the religious system and they're committing sins of ignorance. They don't know any better because they've been deluded by those who ought to know better. But that doesn't change that they're committing sin or that they're in spiritual adultery. What it does mean, though, is that the level of accountability is now different. And so how do you go about addressing it? Okay, this is where wisdom and discernment comes in. But notice how Mystery Babylon, honey, oil, sensuality, the harlot is placating to you. As the title says, you like it. Proverbs 6, the commandment is a lamp and the teaching a light, and the reproofs of discipline are a way of life. to preserve you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. So this is what we've been given to be able to withstand against spiritual adultery, to flee spiritual adultery. We've been given the word, the teaching, so you can make an allusion to the fivefold ministry there, and to reproof and discipleship. We have the word, the spirit, and each other. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. So now it's the lust of the eyes. Do you see what's going on? And look at this. The adulteress is beautiful. Look at it. On the outside, she is beautiful. This should make allusions to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was pleasing to the eyes, desirable for food, and desirable to make one wise. Do you see the parallels? In fact, we'll go to that verse in a bit. For the price of a prostitute is only a loaf of bread, and a woman of men hunts down a precious life. I've put it in inverted commas here because that's what the literal Hebrew is saying. Like the English translations will usually have the word adulteress there, but the Hebrew literally says a woman of men, i.e., she gets around. As the book of Revelation says, all the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. No one is off the hook. We have all been entertaining the system, this harlot, in one way, shape, or another. This is what the Feast of Unleavened Bread is actually given to us for, so that we can get rid of this stuff. This takes us right back to the garden, again, right at the beginning. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And I made the case here, the word chamad in the passive form, in the nifal form, it literally means the tree was there to be desired. Yah created it to be desired. And we made the case in part 1. Why? Why? He wants to see where your heart's desire is at. You know, how do you truly test something if it doesn't tempt? That means it has to have an allure, a temptation has to be in place. If not the temptation, the test is not real. And so this is why, you know, again, it says, do not desire her beauty and let her eyelashes captivate you. Mystery Babylon is designed to do this. The question is, where is your heart's desire? Are you going to satiate your fleshly desires, your desires of the eyes, or the desires of the pride of life? Or are you going to desire him? And how will he really know? This gets into the essence of why the fall, why the time domain. And we'll get into this in part 3, in Serving Self, we are part 3. And so the Apostle John speaks of this. This is, if you want to know how the enemy operates, this is how he operates. This is how spiritual adultery works. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, look at this. The love of the Father is not in him. The desire of the Father is not in him. Love and desire, they're intrinsically linked, are they not? If you love something, you'll desire it. For all that is in the world, look at this, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. He wants to know, are you for me or for the world? And the world will placate to yourself. All the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of Elohim abides forever. The will, the desire. Do you see the words love, desire, will, they're all kind of together. And I've put here that the traditions of men or the system will cater to these three things. Every sin you find in Torah will placate one of these, if not all three, or a combination of them. And it all comes from self. Understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. This is Paul speaking about the believers. For the people will be lovers of self. They will desire self. Their desire will not be for Elohim, it will be for themselves. Lovers of money. So lovers of money could be the lust of the flesh. It could be the pride of life. It could also be the lust of the eyes, because you can buy all these wonderful goods. Proud, self, arrogant, self, abusive, bring it all the way back, self. Disobedient to their parents, self, because that's usurping. Ungrateful, self. Unholy. Now, again, unholy, in light of Mark chapter 7 and what Yeshua said, let's remember the flesh is already defiled and sentenced to die. You cannot sanctify that which is destined to die. So what is truly unholy that Paul is speaking of here? It's the heart, the desires of it. Heartless. Oh, they have no heart. Why? Because it may as well be dead. You were dead in your trespasses, in your missing the mark, in your breaking of the covenant. The covenant exposed that your heart was in fact dead. Unappeasable, self. Slanderous, self. Without self-control, self. Brutal, self. Not loving, it's all self. Treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of Elohim, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people. The whitewashed tombs, the Pharisees, those that are drunk on the wine of mystery Babylon. Avoid it. You know, when Paul says in his letters, stand against the adversary in his attacks, right? And the fiery darts of the enemy. By the way, the fiery darts, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. That's it. What's the one sin he says, run? Adultery, both physical and spiritual, because you cannot win. The adversarial position, Mystery Babylon, is designed to win. You cannot beat it. This is why he says, come out of her. By the way, when we get into the practicals, this is why you cannot save those that are caught up in this. It has to be an act of their personal sovereignty before the Creator to come out of it. Anyway, for among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women, though themselves burdened with sins and led astray by various passions, desires. Their desires are completely misaligned, and they're doing so in the name of the faith. And so Curtis has made the point, look at specifically, it will particularly go after the woman's design. But I believe this can also apply to the spiritually vulnerable, the little ones, those that do not know any better. That's who they prey on. Again, think of the Korah rebellion. Who did Korah, Dathan, and Abiram go? They went to the tribe of Reuben. They were vulnerable in that sense. Always learning, never able to arrive at the knowledge of truth. Like your Pharisees, outwardly appearances. But as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moshe, so these men also opposed the truth. Men corrupted in mind and disqualified regarding the faith. Disqualified is maybe a bad term because The Greek is adokimos, which means, so dokimos is a word that's used of putting gold and silver through fire to test its purity. And so you're testing whether it's actually worthy of value by passing it through the fire. When you put adokimos, you put the letter A before it, it means it's not passed the test. So not standing the test, not approved, properly used of metals and coins, i.e. gold and silver. And so by implication, it's been disqualified because it's being put through the fire and it's being found wanting. Think the parable of the wheat and the tares, right? Tares look like wheat, but actually they're empty and void. Think of the warnings in Jude, waterless clouds borne about by the winds, and Paul would say that these winds are the winds of teaching and doctrine. A waterless cloud is something that looks like it should have life-giving water in it, but actually, where's the rain? Which in ancient times was a problem when you lived in an agricultural society. They will not get very far, for their folly will be plain to all, as was of those two men. Eventually, those with eyes will see it. And so, let's get practical. What the system, I've put here the whoring system, because that's what it is. Mystery Babylon. Serving the system will masquerade as serving Elohim, always. It comes as an angel of light, does it not? We're given these warnings. That means those entertaining her also come as angels of light. It's amazing when I've dealt with dynamics of people falling foul to serving self or serving the system. It's like they just cannot imagine that it could be them that the scriptures are warning about. They just can't. It's like they almost don't believe the word. And then those that are watching around, they're like, but it can't be them. They're my friend. They're my brother. They're my sister. That's what scripture warns of. It masquerades as an angel of light, and they don't even know it. Hence the warning of Isaiah, spiritual delusion. It wouldn't be delusion if they didn't know. What are the outcomes, or some of the outcomes of serving the system? Again, this is by no means exhaustive. And I'm not really going to repeat what we covered last week. Remember, this teaching builds upon what we've covered last week. So anything that was covered last week that can come into this is probably not going to be mentioned. I want to build upon it. The outcome of serving the system will always result in whitewashing. Always. As we saw with the Pharisees, as we see with modern day Judah, as we see with modern day Christianity. It's all outwardly appearances at the expense of the real heart circumcision. This whitewashing results in self-righteousness, because look at how holy and sanctimonious I am. And then that will then lead to the condemnation of others not following suit. So this was actually mentioned last week in this thing of serving man. But what serving the system will do, the system will always put the focus on the flesh and not the heart. Always. Always. Serving the system the outcome is hurting the innocent. And most of you, if not all of you, have been hurt by the system. It will cause those that serve the system to hurt others, but often it will cause them to be hurt in the process. And it's amazing how many people go about things not realizing how truly hurt they are. They mask it with this outwardly appearance of being a tough spirit and you just got to grit your teeth. They have this tough exterior, but actually inside they're hurt. Remember that what we covered last week, when people are hurt, they can go either hardline or too soft. So they dress up the hurt. Some people can't even admit to themselves that they're hurt. An outcome of serving the system is spiritual blindness and delusion, especially in the high positions. The pastors, the teachers, the rabbis, the so-called prophets. The delusion is actually a greater account with them because they ought to know better. Those that are none the wiser are none the wiser. But again, remember that as the book of Proverbs says, being intoxicated with this forbidden woman, the word in Hebrew, shagar, not only does it mean to err, but it also means to do so ignorantly. Haughtiness against the Creator. As Isaiah said, shall the clay say to the potter, you did not make me, I know better. That's essentially what they're saying. They're not saying it with their lips, although some even may. That is delusion. But that's what their actions are saying. We know better. We're above the word. And if we're above the word, we're above the author of it. But they'll dress it up in the service of Elohim. It leads to persecution of those bringing truth and reproof to the system. Eventually, that can even lead to murder. Think Messiah. They actually murdered him because he held them to account. They went to full-on literal physical murder. And in fact, our king warned us that there will be those that will imprison and kill us, thinking they're doing Elohim a favor. They'll be doing it in Elohim's name. Again, the warning is not about the unbelieving world. The warning is about those that fall in this camp. This is why we're to come out of it and have nothing to do with it. This is why, again, we've been given the feast of unleavened bread. But more often than not, look, some of you have been at the receiving end of this, if not all of you. From your families, from your former friends that are still caught up in the whoring system, whatever flavor of Mystery Babylon it is. The system will cater and pander to all your desires. So even though you're serving the system, you peel that layer back, you're actually serving you. You have made yourself God. Whether that be feeding your self-worth. You know, this is why people that climb the proverbial ladder in whatever denomination, it can feed self-worth. It can feed your victim mentality in some cases. They're there. Oh, it's okay. Remember what we covered last week when you serve the body from a place of being too soft or not having overcome yourself, and you can actually foster someone's victim mentality and your own. The system will cater to you generally avoiding accountability as long as you toe the line. You can do whatever you want as long as you follow their rules. You can treat the Roman or even those in it like dirt, as long as you follow the system's rules, or you give a generous donation, whichever, suits your desire. It allows the allowance of doing things in the dark, because the system, look, this is rife in Christianity. It's rife in the more extreme, what's the word? The ones that really separate themselves from society, and all manner of abuse and terrible things that go on behind the scenes because, they don't want to bring shame to themselves or their family. Shame is defined by their version of the system. Okay? Like, the system will have an appearance of accountability, but that accountability will be defined by the system, not biblically. And so because you're not dealing with things accountably in a biblical sense, it actually fosters all manner of stuff to go on behind this. Look, this is why there's affairs, abuse, physical, emotional, spiritual, that go on behind the scenes and you bring it to light, and nothing is done about it. It will cater to your megalomania. Megalomania, for those who don't know what it is, it's the desire for power, wealth, accolades. It's wanting, this manifests itself in wanting to climb the social or system ladder, right? It will feed that. I'm super spiritual because I've made it up the next rung. I'm better than you. Like I said, not exhaustive, far from it. This one, wow. So those caught up within the system will always try and protect itself. And it will, you see this quite a lot, using fear of being rejected from the group, this cult-like mentality. So when you're so wrapped up in the system and if you get your self-worth from being part of whatever denomination, they will use the fear of being rejected or pariahed from this group as a way of actual control. The JWs are really good at this. Those communities that live on the fringes of society and exclude themselves. You get this cult-like mentality. The SDAs are good at this, by the way. Look, any denomination actually is very good at this. Because they will, you best toe the line or we're going to outcast you. And so it's actually a form of manipulation using the fear of the individual of being cast out from the group. This is why some of you struggled to come out of your past Christian journeys, by the way, because you're afraid of losing your friends and family. And this is how the system will protect itself. It plays on your fear. This is why we need to fear Elohim and not man. I'm not pointing this to criticize. I'm just pointing, this is what happens. Yah's order versus Nicolaitanism. So you will very quickly remember, the system will come as an angel of light. It will actually use the scriptures to justify its own actions, okay? But what you start to see is when the system starts taking away people's sovereignty versus Yah's order. So Yah's order, there is order, there is authority. But the best way I can describe it is, Yah will say, you are free to do what you want to do, but you're not going to hurt others while doing it. If you want to self-destruct, go and self-destruct over there. Don't be bringing this here. But you're free to do what you want. Nicolaitanism, or the system, will say, stop it now. Stop it now or else. This is why the system often usurps marriages. Again, when you're putting the system above your spouse, and by extension, the leader of whatever denomination or assembly you're in, this is why these two usually come wrapped up together. The system will often usurp marriages because it's the system's way or the highway. And even down to almost negligible things, Let me use an easy example to use. And unfortunately, I've seen this kind of behavior, but the Torah, let's use tassels, tzitzits, as an example. The Torah says you will have tassels, right? Doesn't tell you, all it says is you shall have a thread of blue, right? I've seen people fall out because they didn't tie the tassels the certain way. Or you're not wearing them correctly. Whoa. Slow down. Often, and we'll get onto this, but because the system focuses on these outwardly appearances, what you'll usually find is that the system, the whore system, will define its own standard of righteousness. like the Pharisees did, like Judah does today, especially how Christianity does today. They redefine the standard of righteousness, right? Because it's the traditions of men above the Torah. And so when you don't toe the line to these traditions, now you start to see Nicolaitanism. This is why in this community, wear your zeets how you want. We're not going. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to use a practical example, and quite often you will see this putting the pastor rabbi above the spouse. They usually come together. The system will almost always have a leavened view of prophecy. You can almost guarantee it. Almost guarantee it. Like, it's amazing how dispensationalism has infected both sides of the river in the modern expression, in modern days. Both sides. I know it sounds weird. Well, how is Judah, dispensationalism, believe me, has leavened Judah just as much as it has Christianity. But you get these like really weird, look, I'm not going to sit here reeling off denominations, but they've always got really wonky views of prophecy. It's amazing. And anyway, so I'm not going to go on a tangent on this one. The system will often have its own definition of righteousness. And it will usually, its standard of righteousness is quite often based on the outside of the tomb, what you can see on the outside. Okay? Like, you don't look good, you don't smell good, you don't sound good, blah, 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 blah. It will define its own definition of righteousness and then ostracize those that do not toe according to its own definition of righteousness. And what this does will put those serving within the system on a performance treadmill. Always, always, always. And you're constantly, it's the religious form of keeping up with the Joneses, if that makes sense. And you're constantly, it's very demoralizing and hard labor to paint the outside of that tomb. I mean, it's hard work and it's a never-ending process, because here's the thing. Remember what I said, your flesh is destined to die. It's already defiled. Good luck sanctifying that thing. The system will often use its quote-unquote numbers. I've put here large numbers to bolster that it stands on so-called truth. And this is a form of mentality. So what it will do is look at we're all in agreement. You're the ones a lot of you will have experienced this coming out of whatever religious journey you've come from. You were the only ones that we're seeing what you're seeing in scripture. And they were saying, well, we can't all be wrong. You're the one that's wrong. It's actually a form of mob mentality. And the mob is not always right. Generally, it's never right. On the other extreme, though, it can use its fewer numbers to make the same point. So this is when you get the more fringe extreme groups. They will go, look at how different we are to everybody else. And we're the small chosen ones, right? Oh, we're the Church of Philadelphia. And they'll use their few numbers to make the exact same point. We're standing on the truth. Both are extremes. These are things that we've witnessed. When people don't get rid of the leaven of the system, because look, we're all dealing with a yeast infection spiritually, right? We've all got leaven that we're dealing with. But one of the things we've seen is when people don't get rid of that leaven, they then bring it with them. And when you don't allow them to have their leaven, they actually react really badly. They go, this can't, you're being controlling, you're being this, you're being this. Like, whoa. Like, The Father's led you here for a reason. We see there's some leaven, and we're just saying, hey, don't be bringing that leaven here. Like the amount of times we see this. And pick your topic. I mean, it's getting to the stage. We've seen it all, whether it be views on prophecy, views on the Godhead, views on how to go about discipleship for men and women, views on, like Yah's order and authority, like fill in the blank. It doesn't matter. We've seen it all. And so, again, like we don't hold it against people. We know it's not them. It's the leaven in them. It's mystery, but we've all dealt with this. But again, this is why we're told to get rid of the leaven. Not only does it make you hard of hearing, but when it gets challenged, like again, when leaven or spiritual darkness or spiritual adultery gets challenged, it reacts violently or it runs or both. Lone wolves. This one's really interesting. A lot of lone wolves are actually often serving the system, but as individuals. So even though they're not affiliated or partake, they're off out on their own, they're actually serving the system because they haven't actually got rid of the leaven of Mystery Babylon in their own lives. I hope people can see what again, this is something that we as an eldership in this community have seen. Like you get this lone wolf going around, usually coupled with savior of the body mentality, usually being driven from hurt and feeding self-worth, setting up their own forms of serving to the body that do not align biblically. But you look at their lives and you see, like, whether it be the leaven of Christianity from this denomination or the leaven of Judah from this sect, and you just see this mishmash of, leaven from different aspects of the system. Well, who are they really serving? Do you see what I mean? So even though they're not part or affiliated with a group, they're still operating according to the system's MO. Because they haven't got rid of it. And so they're serving the system and self. Like I said, this is by no means exhaustive. I'm barely scratching the surface, but hopefully people are beginning to see how there's really nothing new under the sun. Like everything that's written in scripture, I'm hoping that people are able to see it in through our modern lens, as it were. It's the same principles that we're dealing with. It's the same harlot. She just wears different dresses, right? She's got a dress if you like this. She's got a dress if you like that. And I hope people are really starting to see that all these things are completely intertwined, and at the root, we're the problem. You and I. It's all about self. So let's stop here, because next week we're going to start looking at, why, part of the reasons of why this test, why the time domain, why Yah would allow it. What does serving self really ultimately, what is the test between serving Elohim and Messiah? Right. Let's stop here. We'll do some Q&A. Amen.